the Bank of Canada is beginning public consultations on a central bank digital currency. So put on your tinfoil hats and let's take a look at what's going on. Oh, wait, it's Reuters. It's the mainstream. So we don't need our tinfoil hats because, yes, it's actually happening. The central bank digital currency is coming, and they're starting to ask you what you think about it, even though they're not going to take any notice of that. The Bank of Canada on Monday launched public consultations on the features that could be included in a digital Canadian dollar in an exploratory move to gouge the viability of a digital version of the currency. And that's probably like what would people like to see in that, because it would make sense for the government and the Bank of Canada to try and understand that in the best way they can possible, to then leverage that to get people to adopt it. I mean, it's quite smart when you really think about it, but, you know, a lot of people aren't going to realize what's really going on. And, you know, it's just so interesting that this is happening right now. And considering what's going on with the banking crisis, everything like that, I think this could be pushed if there's a massive crisis, which looks insanely likely, highly probable at this point. As the world becomes increasingly digital, the bank, like many other central banks, is exploring a digital version of Canada's national currency. The central bank said in a statement, the consultation runs until June 19th. Central banks across the world are studying digital versions of their currencies to avoid leaving digital payments to the private sector, as the decline of cash has accelerated in some cases due to the pandemic. So, you know, everything that's happened with that has kind of accelerated what is now coming forward with central bank digital currencies. Don't you just find that a coincidence? Don't you find that kind of interesting that that's happened? Because I certainly do. But, you know, I think really that they are going to leverage this and then at a later date likely leverage a system around climate change, some sort of, you know, carbon score system. And they're already talking about this. For those of you that will comment saying, Luke, you're going way off on this one. You're totally wrong. This is not going to happen. This is already being discussed at the World Economic Forum, as I'll show you right now.
We're developing through technology an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
So you can understand how this is going to work, and you're going to obviously be given some incentive to opt in to this sort of process. So the masses, so the herd that has been, you know, is in such a high amount of debt, is so enslaved in debt that they depend on the government. They depend to need every single dollar that the government gives them. So they're going to go and adopt this score. Maybe it's you get discounts on certain things for having better carbon scores. God knows what it's only going to be. I cannot imagine what a terrible system it's going to be if the government is the one implementing it and controlling it. Can you just imagine that for a second? So it's really insane. China has been a leader among countries developing central bank digital currencies. So that's interesting that they bring this up, because they've also been a leader when it comes to developing social credit scores, which, you know, it's just, I'm going to play some clips and then you take a look. So this is what happens if you're good with your social credit score.
And that's totally fine with Oh Young Hao Yu. She's 21, graduated from a good school with solid grades. She's diligent. She's nice. No surprise, she's a 752. That's her rating with Sesame Credit, a private company working with the government on the algorithms for the social credit system.
So isn't that kind of scary? And that's the dystopian nightmare that we're heading towards at full acceleration with everything that's going on. And you know you can dupe the entire public into accepting it if you just enslave them with so much debt, which is what the government has pushed people in to do. I mean, it's almost like a perfect recipe. it doesn't even seem like, there'll be any pushback at this point, at least from most Canadians, because their back is against the wall, essentially. They took the bait, they took the cheese. So it's really interesting. Another thing, obviously, with that is she's really happy because, her social credit score is great, whatever, or carbon score, just replace social with carbon credit score, whatever. It's exactly the same type of system. And, to those of you that are going to say, Luke, you're really off on this one. Like, there's no way that's going to happen. It already happened, for crying out loud. Just go back to 2021. Every single province in Canada tried and tested types of social credit scoring systems, which was, if you made a medical decision that the government didn't like, you didn't get to go to a restaurant, you didn't get to go to a cinema, and what else is it going to be? If you say something the government doesn't like, if you don't do what the government wants you to do, then you get into trouble. Your social credit score goes down. You can't enjoy the niceties of life, just the everyday things that we take for granted right now. The freedom and liberty that we need to work and protect, do everything in our ability to protect. This is why I keep bringing this up. This is why I continue to do political videos where other YouTubers avoid them, is because I believe it's so important to protect freedom and liberty at all costs, because everything is just kind of turning into this dystopian nightmare. So it also says, which I find really hilarious, the central banks of Japan, Brazil, and Australia have also taken steps towards launching digital tokens. So just think about Australia and what was going on in Australia in 2021. I mean, they were literally making camps and they went out full authoritarian. Japan completely shut down. And in fact, I pulled off the World Economic Forum's website this. So, Prime Minister Kishida of Japan outlines vision for a new form of capitalism. Japan calls for a liberal democratic capitalism that balances growth and distribution. Transformation of Japan's economy will be driven by a digitization, that's a mouthful, and investments in green technology and human capital. Japan's borders to remain closed until the end of February because they had a zero tolerance policy during the pandemic. So isn't that kind of insane, guys, when you really think of it? This stuff has happened. This is really what's going on. This is right on the World Economic Forum's website. So, this shows just how crazy it is. And they're not hiding it. I mean, just look what Rishi Sunak said.
Today, I'm proud to say that under the UK's presidency, the group of the world's 7 most advanced economies, the G7, is launching a set of public policy principles for retail central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Central bank digital currencies could be a digital version of money, a bit like a digital banknote that could be used alongside physical notes and coins. Unlike most of the digital money people use daily today, it would be issued directly by a central bank, like the Bank of England in the UK. And governments and central banks across the world are working together, looking into what having a digital currency might mean in practice.
Can you imagine the corruption? I mean, the thing is, it's just kind of crazy where I think this is going when it comes to central bank digital currencies. And I really just believe they're the start, because they will have little to no impact on your personal freedom at liberty, at least at first. Obviously, they're not going to come out with these things because they know that there would be massive opposition from people if they knew these things were coming down the pipe at a later date. But you can already see with the carbon credit scores, the green agenda, how we're going to be heading towards this new era, at least the West is, which is going to be a massively inflationary era, as we know already, and is going to cost a heck of a lot of money and is going to be ripe for corruption and all kinds of crony capitalism, which is already apparent across the West. And places like Canada have been the center of it for so long. And, Canada is kind of a funny one because when you think of Canada, you've got to remember that we have a government right now that is run by Trudeau, who is a big favorite of the World Economic Forum. And then you've got Freeland, who's actually a trustee on the board at the World Economic Forum. I do not understand how that's even allowed. It just baffles me that there's no conflict of interest law that prevents her from being on that board or prevents her from being in her post as finance minister. Massive conflict of interest there. And then you've got Jagmeet Singh. You've got Jagmeet Singh, who is a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. And I just want to jog your memory back to what Klaus said in 2020, because when you actually look back, don't you think he was sort of right? And isn't that kind of scary in a sort of sinister way?
But what we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed. Definitively a lot of anger already now, but probably increased by the end of the year, because this crisis will be with us until we really have found a remedy. So we have to prepare for a more angry world. But we should be aware we are just increasing our debt situation. And we were already very much debt loaded before we went into the crisis. So how to get at the end out of this debt situation is still a big question.
And I think they've answered that question, because that question is going to be a central bank digital currency. It's been inflation. And we're going to see this, unfortunately, probably continuously, because we have a bunch of freaking clowns who are in government, not just in Canada, here in the UK too, in Europe, in the United States. And no matter which party you vote in, it's really the crony capitalists who are in the background, who you're not seeing, who continue to run the show and continue to influence the government to do what they want to do. And, you know, it's just kind of absolutely insane. It's scary, really, what's going on with the central bank digital currencies and what could be coming down the pipe. But I think it's obvious that these carbon scores are coming, but it's just it's really gonna be interesting on how they're gonna implement that and get people to blindly accept that. And I think it's gonna be through some type of reward, because, like I said, so many people are enslaved through this debt slavery, and that really is why the government endorses it and wants it so much. They want people to get into debt. They want people to buy their home. They wouldn't want people to buy their home if they were buying it for cash. I guarantee you, it's all about the debt situation. So it's really, really interesting. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you might like that video there. You might also like this video here. I want to thank you so much for watching another pre-recorded live stream. I hope you enjoyed it here from England, and I will see you on the next one. Take care of yourselves, guys. Bye.